My background is I've been a professor of philosophy and religion, also dealing with humanities, anthropology for over 30 years. And this is a project I've been wanting to do for a long time, a presentation. And it has to do with the artistic temperament. And I finally had the luxury to sit down and get to pull up some examples from history. And so without further ado, let's get into it. I got a lot of people I want to share with you. And I am not a clinician or therapist, and so I'm not going to be giving any assessments. And if you hear me use the word like depressed or depression, I'm not necessarily using that in a clinical sort of means, but it certainly could be. But I just want to give you an example, a sampler of this artistic temperament and some famous people, many of which I'm sure you've heard of, and the incredible struggles they went through in their lives. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm hoping we can have a dialogue together. And I'm sure a lot of you have a similar temperament and can relate. And if you don't, you probably have family members or colleagues or clients or students, co-workers that share in this artistic temperament. And so my hope at the end of this discussion is you'll have a better understanding of the artistic temperament, its strengths, its weaknesses, and then we'll have a discussion on maybe some ways that would be helpful to people with this temperament, how to navigate life. This is called David and Goliath. Right. And so what's so fascinating about me, and he'll definitely, Caravaggio was a Baroque painter, and he'll definitely be one of the artistic temperaments we'll be talking about tonight. And he is the person that invented the technique called chiaroscuro. Does anyone know what chiaroscuro means? And if you haven't had me before as a guest lecturer, I do love to interact and discuss as we go. So anytime you have a question or a comment, um, please speak up. Anyone know what chiaroscuro is?
Yeah, it's the when you're painting, you use the effect of dark and light to be able to create contrast within your painting.
Yes, very good. Thank you. And so this is such a great example of this technique where it's almost like the light is exploding out like back where we are on to the young David. And in this picture, he's holding the severed head of Goliath. But the severed head of Goliath is a self-portrait of Caravaggio. And so that should give you some insight into his mental state of being, how he viewed himself, etc. But we'll get into that as we go. Just for a refresher, um, being a philosopher, I'm much more in tune with the ancient Greek temperament types, and these come from Hippocrates, where we get the Hippocratic Oath from. And I found this chart online and I thought it was helpful because in addition to having um, Hippocrates' four temperament types, the sanguine, choleric, melancholy, and phlegmatic, it's also combined with Galen. And Galen brought up this idea of humors and this idea of wet or dry, hot and cold. And so you get these different combos and you can see them plotted out within these different temperament types. And the one I want to focus on specifically tonight is this melancholy temperament type. And let's just go together real quickly. Like all temperament types, they have strengths and weaknesses. And if you haven't done much temperament work, these are nice models, but I'm not trying to act like these accurately represent a human being or human beings. In fact, I think as you're looking at these strengths and weaknesses and descriptions of these personality types, you'll begin to notice you might have several strengths or weaknesses in many different temperaments. And most humans, I believe, are a combination of multiple temperament types. It's very rare to find someone that is just a pure choleric or a pure phlegmatic. I mean, they may be out there or they may seem like 99%, but most of us are a blend of two or more of different temperament types. So let's look at the melancholy. Strengths would be thoughtful, considerate, cautious, organized, um, planner, schedule orientated, detailed, highly creative in poetry, art, and invention, independent, good at preventing problems. Part of why they're good at preventing problems is they have a good ability to kind of look ahead. They are great at pattern recognition. They can see how things are happening. This is an incredibly introverted temperament type. And so both melancholy and phlegmatic would be our introverted personality types, whereas sanguine and choleric would be the extroverted types. And just a general note on those two things is remember, people who are extrovert, they actually get energized by being out and about with other human beings. And that's how they recharge their batteries. They're people. They like to be around people. Whereas the introverts, the phlegmatics and the melancholies actually need downtime. Some of them need massive downtime to recuperate from being around other human beings because it takes so much energy for them to navigate and to process. Some of these weaknesses in the melancholy temperament are they can be obsessive, they can be overly cautious, they can be prone to depression or moodiness, they're perfectionist, they can be pessimistic, difficult to please. Obviously, if you're a perfectionist, you're going to be difficult to please, right? At least in this world, because we see precious little perfection here. They're deeply affected by tragedy. There are people who can have a tunnel vision. This is part of why they can become philosophers or theologians or artists because they get this myopic view where they can just laser focus on a particular individual task or object or purpose. Um, Sometimes they can be procrastinators. They are often discontent with themselves and others, and they can be prone to play the martyr. Any questions or comments on this slide before I move on?
So these just represent personality types, just for clarification, is what you're
Yes,
teaching on for Blackburn?
yes. And
Okay.
I realize probably very few of you, some of you might be familiar with these ancient Greek temperament types, but my next slide, I actually try to combine them with more contemporary, like Myers Briggs, so you can, because probably in your discipline, you're probably more familiar with that one.
Yeah, I just learned about this one. I learned about it from you before you talked about it, but I was just the class I'm in now. We're talking about it, or just went over it again.
Excellent. Any more questions before the next slide is going to show how they kind of relate to other temperament tests or surveys. I threw the Enneagram in there just because I've seen it's making kind of a comeback in certain circles. So I thought that might be interesting to you to see how these line up. So with the sanguine, we would have type 7, the enthusiast, optimistic, fun-loving, avoids pain. In the Myers-Briggs, these would be the ESFP and ENFPs, the outgoing, spontaneous, focused on experiences. For our choleric, the Enneagram type would be the challenger, assertive, driven, strong-willed. In Myers-Briggs, these are your natural born leaders, goal-orientated, decisive. Oops. For the melancholy, um, Enneagram type 4, the individualist, introspective, sensitive, creative. With the Myers-Briggs, these would be your INFJs and INFPs, deep thinkers, perfectionist, emotionally attuned. And then phlegmatic would be Enneagram type 9, the peacemaker, calm, agreeable, conflict averse. These are your easygoing types of people. And your Myers-Briggs, your ISFJs, and your INTPs. Does that kind of help calibrate you all to the temperament type I'm focusing on tonight? So we are going to be highlighting this melancholy group tonight on our little journey. And once again, most of us are a blend or a mix of multiple personalities. So you may not be a full-blown melancholy, but you may have melancholy elements as part of your personality types and traits.